A year ago, he was in just his second top division tournament. 2 years ago, he hadn't even stepped foot in the dohyo. But as of today, Onosato is a three-time yusho winner in Grand Sumo. We're going to talk about his performance and a bunch of others today on the New to Sumo podcast.
Let's start the show. New to Sumo, here we go.
We want to thank everybody who has been following our podcast. We just hit 1,000 subscribers after our last video, and to reward you, the viewers and listeners, we are going to be having our first community mailbag. So put your questions in the comments here or in the post that will be coming up on our YouTube page after this video goes up, and we will answer all of your questions, or as many as we can, before the next tournament.
From the moment he came up to the Makuuchi division, it's so fresh to the sumo world that he didn't even have enough hair for a top knot when he first came up to the division and won in, I think, his second or third tournament up at the very top. Onosato has just seemed like a really special talent. Personally, he's probably my favorite wrestler. I love his demeanor. I love the hilarious pictures of the guy that we get on social media. He seems like such an entertaining guy, and I love his brand of sumo and just his body language and everything. He just seems like a great guy. And not to mention, he's a fantastic sumo wrestler. I know all the talk has been about Hoshoryu for a while, but the truth is that Onosato has been in and around it for the longest time. I actually did a little bit of digging, and I found that even though Onosato's only been in the Makuuchi division for 8 tournaments, his average number of wins per tournament is 11. You compare that to our now Yokozuna Hoshoryu, whose average wins per tournament, granted in a much longer time in the top division, is 9 wins. So when we were talking about what kind of level of performance would you be expecting from a Yokozuna, well, I would say look no further than Onosato, who is now on a rope run after having won his third tournament, and this time at the Ozeki rank. What do you think we're going to see from him in the next tournament?
I think we're going to get something extremely close to a Yokozuna worthy performance, if not the outright yusho. I mean, it's it's just so hard to find the right words to describe how lightning fast he's risen through the sport. Now, granted, his rise is very unusual compared to the usual route. Like, I could, if I want to, make the case that, oh, he's already a three-time Yusho winner while, the great Hakuho was still in Makushita by his 12th tournament. But that wouldn't really be fair because he had that special situation where he gets to come in all the way at like the top of the Makushita division to begin with. And, he gets that incredible mentor in a former Yokozuna. There's just so many things have given him a sort of edge that even the all-time greats haven't had. But there's just no denying it. 3 tournament wins in the past year is something that nobody except, a Yokozuna has been able to do in recent memory. Terano Fuji early in his Yokozuna run, and of course Hakuho before him. Like, those are the only 2 guys in the last decade or so that have been able to do something like this. It really is no longer a question of if he can reach Yokozuna, like we've asked of guys like Hoshoryu, Takayasu, and Kotozakura. The only 2 questions we have of Onosato now are, when will he reach Yokozuna, and how many championships will he win before he retires? And that's all we can really ask of him at this point after all we've seen.
It's pretty incredible. And, I know we're spending all of the start of the show talking about Onosato, but I think there's a really great comparison with the guy that he was facing off with at the end of this tournament, which is Takayasu. Now, let me know, has Takayasu ever won a Yusho in his career?
He has not. He is, in all sports, we all know that one team or that one athlete in all sports, the one who gets close to the mountain and then just just seems to fall off right at the end and just can't get it done. It's Paris Saint-Germain in the Champions League. It's Charles Barkley and Patrick Ewing against Michael Jordan. It's the Buffalo Bills and Minnesota Vikings in the Super Bowl. Whatever sport you love aside from sumo, there's always that one guy or that one team that is just second banana always. And that's just what Takayasu's legacy is probably going to be after this. And it's a little upsetting and also frustrating, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I know there was a large contingent of the fan base that was really looking forward to a Takayasu. I would have loved to see it either way. Honestly, all of the guys who were competing for the Yusho in this one, which we definitely got to spend some time talking through all those names. I would have been happy to see any of those people winning the Yusho: Onosato, Takayasu, Onishiki, who we'll talk about in just a bit, Tamawashi at 40 years old, having an amazing tournament and was in the Yusho hunt early. I think Takayasu winning it would have been really special, and it's a shame it didn't happen. I heard something like this might have been his fourth or fifth or even more loss in a playoff for the championship, which is just
That would not surprise me in the list, unfortunately.
yeah. So, but none of that is to take away from him having a very impressive tournament. 12 wins is some serious stuff, and he was in a Yusho hunt not long ago. Also, then he was dealing with injuries for a while, but he's not a stranger to Yusho races. And when you look at Tamawashi, who at 40 years old is putting up double-digit wins in several tournaments and just in and around like the top of the division for so long. Takayasu could keep doing it for a couple more years, and if he keeps competing like he's been, it's possible it'll still happen for him. It's certainly not too late because no one would have said it was too late for Tamawashi when he was starting the tournament with what kind of record? I think he started was a 7-2 or something around those numbers. So I think that it's as exciting as it is to see Onosato's incredible rise. It doesn't mean that the older wrestlers are now out of it and don't have a chance to compete. I actually think that this tournament had a really, really lovely balance between the up and coming stars like Onishiki, Takeru Fuji, and maybe Onosato you could consider because of his age, one of the younger stars, even though he feels like an established pro. And then of course Tamawashi and Takayasu on the other side of things.
It's so interesting to see how the young studs go up against the experienced veterans. You have guys like Onosato and to a lesser degree Onishiki that can either dominate or at least prove that they belong in the same dohyo as guys that have been in it since they were still wearing diapers. But at the same time, it's clear that there's a lot of these guys that still are healthy enough and they are ring savvy enough and just good enough to continuously challenge for these titles, even when it seems like we've written them off. All of that being said, though, we can talk about them contending, but when we talk about winning, like actually winning the tournament, that's not what these guys are doing. We have now seen Onosato win those three tournaments. We have seen Takeru Fuji, in the past six tournaments, they have been won by, two Yokozuna, Onosato and Takeru Fuji, two guys that have had like a combined 10 tournaments at the time that they've won all four of those combined titles. There is so much talent at both the veteran ranks and the young ranks. But as far as actually winning these tournaments goes, the young guys seem to have it on lock for now. We will certainly see how that changes, in the next tournament, and maybe the tournament after that once Onosato stops being the hunter and starts becoming the hunted.
Yeah, it'd certainly be interesting to see. Onosato is just a guy. I think he's been in every time I've made my picks for Kachi Clash, the tournament that we like to talk about on the channel, where we make our picks for who's gonna have the best performances. I pick Onosato every single time. I just feel like he is so reliable when it comes to getting wins in this tournament. He's never had less than 9 wins in the tournament, and he, like I said, he averages 11. It's just incredible. I mean, he's in a yusho hunt every single tournament he competes in, except for one that he started 2 and 3. That's the only time he's ever really been out of it at the beginning. Um, so I think he's the real deal. When Hoshoryu got promoted to Yokozuna, a lot of people were talking about what does Yokozuna form look like, and they were already making very unfair comparisons to Hakuho, the greatest to ever do it with 45 championships. I certainly don't want to do the same unfair comparison with Onosato. All I will say is that the rate that Onosato is winning championships is is an incredible pace that could have him being a truly historic competitor if he continues at even a fraction of the pace that he's competing these days. I wish for him, health and that he continues this success. If he does, I mean, he could be a double-digit Yusho winner over his career, maybe even significantly more than just double digits. But again, I don't want to get too ahead of myself with it. And it's just really exciting to see this all happen. Since we've started watching sumo, to see Onosato's rise has been really, really great. Also, it's nice seeing him competing with Takeru Fuji, who I know a lot of people see as possibly being his sort of foil in these tournaments. And Takeru Fuji had a really nice tournament. He's still not back to the level that he was at when he first came up. He was not really in the Yusho hunt for very long in this tournament, which was too bad to see. It would have been great to see him doing what Onosato's doing for the longest time. And he ended very poorly with 4 straight losses. But for a while he was in and around it, and it was nice to see. I don't know, something about these two guys competing against each other. It just feels it's like a really nice sort of rivalry, if you want to call it that.
No, no question. I mean, it's partially because they are both the future of the sumo stables that had our previous two Yokozuna. Onosato's mentor is the former Yokozuna Kisano Sato, who is, now one of the top judges. And Takeru Fuji was the sword bearer for for the Isagahama's former Yokozuna, Teruno Fuji. So these are guys that have been directly in the shadow of two enormous, figuratively and literally, figures in the sport of sumo. And, even if they don't get the same amount of external pressure to become as good as them, they certainly have that internal pressure as well. They've got to. That's just the way the sport is with the way pressure works.
Yeah, and I'm looking forward to seeing a lot more from these two. And my blessing for all the members of the Makuuchi division, because it's been so exciting these last few tournaments, is I hope everybody stays healthy.
Hmm.
Takeru Fuji, who came up and had an incredible first tournament and then dropped back down. I don't want to see that anymore. I want to see him keep pushing and pushing. The same can be said for Koto Zakura, who had a tough tournament. It seemed like people were speculating that he was nursing some kind of injury. But he did manage to get his Kachikoshi. He got the winning record he needed after last tournament, where he was Kadoban, and had he not gotten the 8-7 record he got this time, he would have dropped out of the Ozeki rank. So happy for him that he managed to make that happen. I hope that the 8-7 record, the improvement on his last performance means that whatever he was dealing with is getting better. I don't know if you have any more information about an injury that he was managing during this one, but it's nice to see him back up. I wish for him a lot of health, and then the same also for our Yokozuna, Hoshoryu, who dropped out of the tournament after quite a few losses. He ended up having 5-5 record before pulling out of the tournament. And maybe you could share a little bit more about what those two wrestlers were dealing with, if you happen to know.
Well, first off, I have to just pat myself on the back. I hope we can get a clip of it, but I did predict that the very first day would see Hoshoryu drop a black star to Abi, the absolute master of chaos, although he wasn't on the final day. But I mean, we spoke about it after the last tournament. The message to the Yokozuna Deliberation Council and the JSA: get ready to learn Kinboshi, buddy, because As we expected, he gave up a few Kinboshi that he probably shouldn't have. He allowed Chiyoshima to hanka him, and he lost a fair and square one to Takayasu, but he also lost to Ichi Yamamoto, the sort of poor man's Abi, as I like to think of him. Sorry to any Ichi Yamamoto fans, but you know that I'm right. And the after that it was like, well, I've had this arm injury since last tournament, which was confirmed. He has been dealing with a elbow injury he sustained in January. And he decided to set aside, the whole macho, yeah, I'm not going to withdraw no matter what mentality, and just decided, it would be better to withdraw with a 5-5 record than to potentially end with a 5-10 record. And hopefully, this is not a sign that he has simply, caught whatever injury bug that the last few Yokozuna have had
Heaven
at,
forbid.
yeah, at the age of only 25. It would be just obscene. But, you know, if you look at his 2024, it really is kind of strange that as soon as January hit, he started exiting tournaments early. He had an injury last January, then he had to pull out with another injury in July. And that was two of only three times in his entire career that he's had to withdraw due to injuries prior to this one. So I think it's worth wondering if the injuries are starting to mount now that he is facing the best of the best every single day, and it's going to start taking a toll on his body. It's just something worth mentioning, not a prediction that I'm making.
Yeah, like the last thing we'd want for any wrestler, whether we're the biggest fans of them, like, certain guys that we just love as wrestlers or guys we don't, we want everyone to be healthy because that just makes the sport
Hmm.
great. We both love Hoshoryu as a wrestler and as a personality with the media and everything, and definitely hoping that whatever he's dealing with is resolved and that we don't see any more Fusen for a while. And yeah, just as far as the absences go, I mean, there is this general pressure for a Yokozuna to not allow themselves to be a losing wrestler and to have a losing record. And if it's looking like they're not going to have a good performance, then they pull out of the tournament. Even if they're well enough to continue competing, if it doesn't look like they're going to get a strong finish, then you just pull out of the tournament. So, there was some speculation as to whether it was a legitimate injury, but obviously, if you go back, he's been dealing with something for a while now. I guess it just gets a little confusing when it happened, and considering how strong his performances were in the last two tournaments, why suddenly now? But that's the thing with injuries in sports. It's all speculation. None of us are. Some of us are probably doctors, maybe listening to the channel, but we're not his doctors, so we don't really know the full picture of things. Anyway, very curious to see what happens next tournaments. I wouldn't be surprised, honestly, if in the next tournaments we see Hoshoryu in the lineup for Onosato as Onosato fights to become the Yokozuna across from Hoshoryu. I think I see a very real possibility of Onosato winning the next tournament and becoming Yokozuna, or at least being in the yusho hunt, and these two folks having a really important match. So looking forward to seeing that soon.
And there is something pretty funny to note. All three of Onosato's titles have come when the Yokozuna has withdrawn midway through. Just something to keep an eye out. Maybe the formula simply is if the Yokozuna is out, Onosato's gonna step up because
Hmm.
I don't think he's ever had to. Yeah, he has never had to fight a Yokozuna in a with a tournament on the line. I mean, granted, it's only been a year, but it's just we haven't. I don't think we've seen him at his best when all of his toughest opposition are at his best, and maybe that'll change next month.
Yeah, I definitely could see it. And then just a few other names that we gotta talk a little bit more about. Again, I just want to go over Takayasu again, who had an incredible 12-win tournament. He had some really amazing wins along the way. Daisho, Wakataka Kage, Hoshoryu, Kotozakura, Onosato, Oho, Wakamoto Haru. I mean, really, he was beating the best of the best in that M4 position. He is fighting everybody in the Sanyaku. And to get 12 wins that way is just really extraordinary. Not to mention beating Abi on the final day. Abi, who is notorious for beating people on yusho runs. He actually managed to stop him on the final day and make it to the playoff. And that's when he ended up losing to Onosato, who just has the confidence. This is something I've said before about certain wrestlers. Once you've had a yusho win, it takes so much pressure off for future yusho hunts. Once you've been there and you've done it, you're making it so much easier for yourself in the future. And you gotta imagine that Takayasu, I don't like the word choke. A lot of people have said it on social media. I don't like that term because I think it kind of, um, I don't know, it delegitimizes just how difficult it is to do these things in the first place. But, Takayasu, who's repeatedly lost in playoffs or just come second best in a lot of tournaments, um, you gotta think that knowing that he has this issue where he has lost the playoffs so many times probably makes it harder for him. Whereas Onosato, who's already won two tournaments going into this final day playoff, thinks, yeah, I can do that because I have done that.
Yeah, I'm beyond frustrated with Takayasu at this point. He's a former Ozaki who doesn't seem like there's any chance in heck that he's going to reach that position ever again. He just always seems to have these inexplicable losses to guys he has no business losing to, at the time that he needs it. Him dropping that loss to Churanaumi on day 14 by just a straight up frontal push out, that felt like it was the most predictable loss of the entire performance. And it was only when he managed to avoid Abi's Henka. Shame on you, Abi, for doing that. That I thought, oh, maybe he's finally turned the corner. But, as it's just become predictable. He has become the guy that is simply the stepping stone to whoever the champion was meant to be. That might sound a little bit harsh, but that's kind of just what his history is going to bear out. Like, unless he wins a championship before he calls it a career, his legacy is going to be the guy who always came in second.
Yeah, and I'm really pulling for him. Thankfully he's been in the hunt enough times that we don't think that's the last time it's going to be him on the final day. And I just hope that the next time he changes his song. Just couple people that we want to mention before we close out because there's plenty on here that we did not get to. Um, Kirishima with an 8-7 record. It's kind of where he's at this point. I mean, he stays in the Sanyaku ranks, which is great. I think Kirishima as a Komusubi feels right. It's too bad that he never lately has really looked like he's back at his Ozeki level best. But I like seeing him up in that Sanyaku rank. An 8-7 record is usually a good indicator that someone is exactly where they belong. So, good for him at least at getting that Kachikoshi staying up. Wakataka Kage at M1 with a 9-6 record, that's enough that he's going up to the Sanyaku and probably taking over for Oho at Sekiwake most likely. You had I'm sorry, Tamawashi with a 10-5 record, which was just so cool to see 40-year-old Tamawashi with 10 wins in the tournament. I love this guy. I picked him for my Kachi Clash in the last tournament. I should have had him in this one, but I love the guy. And can you tell us a little bit more about his incredible record that he's still continuing to keep going?
Yeah, he remains the Iron Man of professional sumo. He has not sustained an injury for his entire career, which goes back all the way to the January 2004 tournament. He has now gone 126 consecutive tournaments without a miss, 1,688 straight matches, not a miss. That is unheard of in this sport and in pretty much every sport except for maybe baseball. He is the Cal Ripken of professional sumo.
Yeah, and it's just so cool to see someone at his age performing so well. It's a great counterpoint to anyone who makes an argument about age being a determinant in the sport. You just look at Tamawashi or even Takayasu with, at the age of 35 doing what he did in this tournament. It's really nice to see the balance between the ages, like we mentioned earlier. And then, just a few more people that are worth mentioning, and probably we got to have a whole conversation about one person in particular, which is Aonishiki, who we hyped up in the last episode of the show. And the way the tournament started, I was getting a little worried that we were going to have to eat our words when he started 0-2. But he ended up finishing the tournament with an 11-4 record and was really around the yusho hunt for a lot of it until getting a loss on day 13. What do you think about his performance in this tournament?
I mean, he definitely. So when we were talking about Onishiki last time, I think I may have been a little bit tongue in cheek when I was saying that I truly believed he could be a Yusho contender. I don't know if I really believed that in my heart of heart. Maybe that was just me hyping him up, but I mean, the proof is in the pudding. To go, 10-2, sorry, 11, yeah, 11-2 over 13 days, like that is the kind of performance that champions are made of. It's what it's what Takeru Fuji was able to do. It's what Onosato was able to do. It's what Hakuoho back when he was a lot younger was able to do. When you come in as red hot as he did to this tournament, outside of those opening losses, and he claimed some pretty noteworthy scalps along the way. He beat Hakuoho, he beat an experienced Meisei, he beat Takeru Fuji by a straight up Yorikiri, and then he caps it off by beating one of the hottest wrestlers, there is in Oho. Like he got, a full course meal of everything to expect in sumo. There's no reason to believe he can't improve on what he did last time, especially with the great coaching that he has.
Yeah, he's a really exciting one to watch. I get the sense, just based on who he beat and who he lost to, that we're not necessarily looking at a an Onosato level climb from Aonishiki, but definitely someone who I think is going to stay in the middle of the division for a long time. He only faced one, or no, sorry, two Sanyaku members in the tournament, and he had a loss against one of them, which was Daisho. So we'll see how he does as he gets his promotion. With an 11-4 record, he'll probably be around, say, M8 in the next tournament, something like that. So we'll see how he does there, and yeah, I wouldn't be too surprised if that's around his level, but hey, he could also just keep climbing because we've certainly seen guys do that in recent history. He's definitely an exciting one to watch, and his style of sumo is pretty unique. So that's been interesting.
Yeah, I
That
mean I just have to say one more thing about him. People started analyzing the way that he moves. He has such a way that makes it extremely difficult to counter. Basically, his whole style is just, put his head down, extend those long arms as far as he can, and dare someone to try and do something without, getting countered if they do too much. It's so unique. He's such an interesting guy to watch, and it'll be fun to see, how high he can climb before somebody actually stops him. And here's something crazy. He still has not had a single tournament at any level where he was fewer than 5 wins above 500. Not even Onosato was able to say that when he was climbing through the ranks.
pretty amazing. I mean, getting 11 wins in your first tournaments in Makuuchi division is alone. It's just incredible. Looking forward to
Incredible.
seeing him keep that up as he gets tougher and tougher competition. Also, it was great to see Hakuoho having a strong performance at 9-6 again.
Hmm.
Shishi, his highest ranking at M13, coming back up from Juryo at this time with a winning record, so he'll be staying up and moving up probably around to M10. So that was cool to see. There was a slight bit of controversy with Shishi at the very beginning of the tournament, and I was commenting on it that he does these little arm grabbies where he's sort of like almost putting up his arms like he's about to box in a way. I can't really think of a better way to describe it. And it was very unusual. It's almost like he's calling his opponent to come towards him, like pulling his arms towards himself. And eventually, he was told that he had to stop doing that because he was being given an unfair advantage. It was against specifically a match against I think it was Chudano Umi. After that win, it seemed like there was some kind of discussion that happened outside of the cameras because at the next tournament and for the next match and the entire rest of the tournament, he was no longer doing his classic move. So that was a little interesting to see that change. That was something that I always found a little bit gimmicky, and I personally didn't like so much because I did think it gave a little bit of an unfair advantage to be doing all these distraction moves right before starting. But all that aside, Shishi had a really great tournament. It was cool to see, and glad that he kind of got his fighting shoes on, I guess, for this tournament, for lack of a better idiom there.
Yeah, I mean, he was technically in Yusho contention right around day 10. I think he was only about 2 wins off the pace. Like, he was doing pretty well. Granted, he hasn't fought a single person above Micah Shira 8, and hasn't beaten anyone above Micah Shira 9. So he's a guy that, he's still getting his top division sumo under him, but this was a massive improvement. I mean, he's had winning records in, I think it is 4 of his last 5 tournaments, which is really darn good for him. So, happy to see the other big Ukrainian boy doing so well up at the top.
Yeah, definitely. And anyone else that we want to mention before we wrap up?
Uh, you know what? Let's give some quick props to the guy at the very bottom of the Banzuke, Maegashira 18 Toki Hayate. This was only his, I believe it was his, yeah, this was his 4th attempt in the Makuuchi division, and it was his first winning record. And if he had won on day 15th, he would have been in contention for the Yusho had, the other top guys lost. So maybe he's finally found his winning sumo in the top division too.
Yeah, it's interesting that a guy has stayed in the division for several tournaments with losing records each time. But there's been a lot of movement in the division, so there was just enough space for him at the very, very bottom of the Banzuke, and he did very well with that position. So yeah, kudos to him. A bit of a, I guess you could say, a late bloomer in the sport, but still very promising. He's got a lot of room to grow. And yeah, he's beating Makuuchi level opposition, so I don't see why he couldn't continue at this pace.
Yep, can't wait to see what he does next. Well, that should about wrap us up for the March Grand Sumo tournament. We're going to have quite a bit of movement in and around the middle of the Banzuke, but the main thing we're all going to be keeping our eyes on next time is Onosato's first Yokozuna rope run. Can't wait for it.
I believe in Onozuna. Let's see it next tournament.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody, and we will see you on the next one.
Join the ranks, let's start the show. New to sumo, here we go. Bouts and shouts, your weekly treat. Every champion you'll meet. Ring the gong, it's time to learn. Sumo tales at every turn. New to sumo podcast fun.